So, hey guys, thanks for jumping on. And we have David with us here, who is a culture coach, and he's going to talk to us, give us some tips. David, say hi.
Hey, how are you guys?
Good morning. So the first question that I would like to ask you is, what is your favorite coaching tip that you like to pass on to all of your clients when you begin working with them?
So when I first start working with someone, the first thing I always tell them is do not be afraid of the silence. Silence is where the magic happens. So many times people are so used to filling that silence with words that they don't think. And so I really try to help my clients become comfortable in the silence.
If you could tell us a story about why you became a coach, and if you could let us know in your answer, is it a part of who you are, or is it some type of experience that led you to the work that you're doing today?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a little bit of both. I think it is a lot of who I am, but in some ways I had to discover that. So I had to discover it for myself. So I began going through a coaching process. And really there was a pivotal time in my life where I reached out and found a coach because I was approaching the age of 50. And I know, sometimes we have these pivotal moments in our lives. Sometimes they're related to age, sometimes they're related to events. For some reason, when I was approaching the age of 50, a good friend of mine gave me a book that I read called Halftime by Bob Buford. And in that book, he talks about moving from success to significance. And for some reason, really, it just really resonated with me because I felt like that's really where I was at the time. And so I joined the John Maxwell team. So John Maxwell is an author who's sold millions of books. I think he's written over 100 books in the realm of leadership. And I thought when I was joining the John Maxwell team that I wanted to be a speaker. I loved speaking and I loved inspiring people. But what I found was through this discovery process and through getting a coach of my own and going through the coaching process, I really found that I was really more of a coach than I was a speaker. And so that process really drove me to start my own company and do more coaching than I do really consulting.
That's awesome, man. So coaching, consulting, it's kind of a fine line that we kind of tiptoe all the time. And we've talked about that with previous coaches on sometimes I want to give you the answer because I know the answer, but I got to pull it out of you. And sometimes I just want to save you the time and give you a little bit of the answer to help you get there faster. I'm similar, and I definitely have a hard time sometimes with it as well. So what kind of coaching, consulting, do you provide, and what's the high level view of your process?
Yeah. So my coaching, I tell people my coaching follows almost two parallel paths. And what I mean by that is many times I'm coming into a company because the CEO or the founder or the leader has talked to me about their culture. They want to develop their culture in a more systematic and intentional way. And so I do that through an 8-step framework that begins with defining that culture. And so we define the culture, and then we create the rhythms or the rituals, I call them rituals, that allow people to practice those behaviors within the context of an organization. Then what usually happens is because I'm so ingrained within the organization and that CEO and the leader and his or her leadership team, I really become sometimes I'll call it the CEO whisperer. And I really am able to begin coaching that leader and his or her leadership team. And that's been the really fulfilling part of what I'm doing, is that I'm not only impacting people individually, but I'm impacting organizations as a whole as I go deeper into organizations to be able to coach not only just the leadership team, but then secondary and third tier leaders as well. So I talk about a parallel path, and that parallel path means that sometimes I'm coming in as a coach for the organization to create a high performing culture. And then there are times too when I travel that parallel path and coach the individual executives and the leadership team as well.
I love that, man. And what stands out to me the most, you have a very clear, defined process. And that's the ideal coach for us. So it's awesome that you're going to be part of our team, is that sometimes people are like, oh, I just kind of pull it out of people. And it just makes me doubt. I go, you know what?
Yeah.
Do you actually have a defined process, or are we just throwing darts in at a dark and hopefully something hits? So that's awesome. So if this is the vessel, right, your process is the ship that carries people somewhere to the destination. What is that ultimate destination for your clients, and how do you know that they got there?
That's a great question, Anton. So the way I approach coaching is that each individual has their own arrival point. So when I take an individual through my coaching process for individuals, that other parallel path, if you will, I have them describe their ideal future. So what does that look like? And sometimes it's even just closing their eyes and actually describing their future self. And I don't care what the time frame is, but what does their future self look like? So it's describing that. And then they have to decide what is the first arrival point. So a lot of times I'm a former flight instructor. So I talk about departure points and arrival points, and there's a lot of different ways to get there. And sometimes you get off course and you have to make minor adjustments. So what I'm having my participants do is describe that ideal future and then decide what is that arrival point, because we can't start a journey unless we know where we're headed. So deciding that first arrival point is really important. So to answer your question, then they're going to describe that arrival point. So we'll know when we get there because they've already described it. So then I'll take them through a process where they discover the options that are available to them. And then they're going to decide on what those actions are. And then, determine to take those steps. And really, that's where I come into play as well from an accountability standpoint, because I want to know, if they've determined to take some steps and they didn't get to their arrival point, what got in the way? Going back to my analogy of the flight instructor, were the winds too strong? Did they blow you off course? What got in the way? So that's the D process that I take people through. Describing their ideal future, deciding the arrival point, assessing where we are and that departure point, discovering, taking a look at the options to get to where we are, and then deciding to make actions and take actions to move forward, and then determining what those steps are from an accountability perspective.
I like that you touched upon the accountability, because you may know where you want to go, but until you take the steps and hold yourself to get accountable for getting there, you may or may not realize where you want to be. So I really appreciate you sharing that piece.
Sure.
And so one of the questions that we also like to ask all of our coaches, so people can get a perspective on whether or not they would like to work with you, is who is your ideal client?
The ideal client is someone who really wants to live their life on purpose and wants to be able to have an intentionality to their life, because not only just an intentionality, but an openness to discover the things that may be in their blind spot, because we all have blind spots, and there has to be an openness to be able to look at something and almost detach from their situation, to be able to say, wonder why I do that. And then be able to then wrestle with that a little bit.
Well, thanks so much for being on with us, man. I mean, it's, I love your energy. I just got to tell you that you have this positive vibe about you that
Thank you.
I'm an empath. Linda's an empath. I can feel the warmth that you bring to your clients through my screen right now. So awesome. That's amazing, man.